Pinag-usapan natin sa previous videos yung information processing model. Right? Pinag-usapan natin yung sensory memory, information gotten from the outside world, and then transferring to the short-term memory through selective attention, and then yung short-term memory na yun will be consolidated through maintenance rehearsal into the long-term memory. And then, if you remember, yung model na yun, same information processing model, meron din dong retrieval part. Right? Ito. Yan, may retrieval part. So, how do we retrieve information from the long-term memory back into our short-term memory, especially if we want to work with them in our working memory? Ano ba yung gagawin natin, or ano ba yung proseso na yun? And this is what we're going to talk about in this video, the retrieval part. Okay? So, in retrieval, getting the information out from our long-term memory, the retrieval cues matter. So, these are the stimuli that help you recall the information. Okay? Yun yung retrieval cues. More cues stored with a piece of information, then the easier the retrieval. If there are more cues, whatever cue it is, okay, whether it's whatever sensory cue it is, like sight, smell, sound, information, context, it will be easier for you to recall that information. Yun yung retrieval cues. Ano ba yung time na yun? What was it like when you were encoding the information? Okay? So yun yung retrieval cues. Ano ba yung mga retrieval cues mo na yan? The sound of the phrase, how it looked like. Yan. So parang may pagka-sensory. Okay? And importante, therefore, yung encoding specificity. So, ano ba yung encoding specificity? The retrieval, getting it out, it improves when the cues, yung sinasabi nating color, itsura, sound, environment, if it improves pagka nagma-match yun sa time na in-encode yung information na yun. So, it's either context-dependent or state-dependent. Let's say you're studying a topic. Okay? Yung retrieval cues mo dyan are information in your environment. Okay? If yung moment na kailangan mong i-retrieve, you see the same cues, it will be easier for you. Okay? That's context-dependent learning. If it's the same environment, it will help your memory. So, yung example dyan sa book, I think, is when you're taking an exam, and you're taking an exam in the same room where you learn the topic. So, siguro ngayon, mahirapan kayong maalala tong konseptong mga to dahil you're not in the classroom because of the suspension of classes. So, it will be, theoretically more difficult for you to retrieve that if we have a quiz next week, right? So, that's context-dependent learning, kung nasaan yung konteksto mo during encoding and retrieval. Pag nag-match yun, it will be easier for you to retrieve it. The state-dependent learning is the same thing, pero hindi siya yung environment. It's your emotional, physiological state. Okay? It's your emotional or physiological state noong pag-encode. But the same concept. If you are in the same emotional state when you encoded the information, as to when you're retrieving the information, then it would be easier for you to retrieve the information. Okay? And in retrieving the information, you also have to differentiate between recall and recognition. So, recall is just retrieving the information with few or no cues. For example, essay or identification. Wala ka namang cues dun, di ba? Parang there's a question. And then you have to recall it. But in recognition, there are certain cues presented, like multiple choice. Right? In recalling, if there are no cues, dito nangyayari yung retrieval failure. O, di ba? Ang bait ko. Hindi ko kayo binibigyan ng identification. There are essays, pero open book naman yung essays natin, right? Kasi yung depth naman yung hihingi ko doon. But in identification, usually merong retrieval failure that happens here, wherein it's when you have difficulty in accessing the information. Yan may, tip of the tongue phenomenon, di ba? In recall also, what you usually remember are the things that begin the series or the list and the things that end the series. Right? So this is called the serial position effect. The tendency to remember items at the beginning more effectively than items in the middle, as well as yung end ng items. No? So that's what we call the primacy effect and the recency effect. Okay? So if you look at this graph, mas mataas yung percentage of correctly recalling the information if it's at the beginning of the list. Right? Ito, for example, sa first siya, mas mataas. And if you notice, mas mataas yung primacy effect no, compared to the recency effect. Parang 50% of the time, you will get it right doon, based on the recency effect. Mas recent yung information na yun. So, if you don't wanna be last, you wanna be first. Okay? Parang mas may impact. Yan. There's this person also, si Dr. Elizabeth Loftus. She's an internationally known expert on the accuracy of eyewitness testimony. So, pinag-usapan natin dito, no? There are sometimes parang inaccurate information that you recall. And yung na-emphasize niya is that memory is not something stable, no? It's changing, it's constantly being updated. Mamaya, in a later video, we're gonna talk about how memory is constructed even, no? And meron siyang experiment na ginawa wherein participants were shown a clip of 8 demonstrators. And then meron siya mga 90 filler questions. But the most important question that she asked in that survey was this one, no? Dinivide niya yung group into two. Yung isang group, same yung clip na pinakita sa kanila, 8 demonstrators, pero dinivide yung group. Yung isang group, sinabihan sila ng question na, was the leader of the four demonstrators who entered the classroom a male? Talking about the clip that was shown. And then the other group was given a different question. Yung question naman is, was the leader of the 12 demonstrators who entered the classroom a male? So medyo nakatago actually yung independent variable. And then the subjects were actually saying a different number or an average of a different number depending on the group that they belong to. So syempre you would understand or you would logically, analyze na mas mababa yung sasabihin nung sinabihan ng question na 4 demonstrators. Kahit na, this is the clincher, this is the important thing, no? They were shown 8 demonstrators. Pareho sila nakakita ng 8 demonstrators. Okay? They've actually seen the same clip. They've actually seen the same 8 demonstrators. Pero, they are actually trying to compromise the information that they've seen because of the new information. So, what is she demonstrating? Pwedeng ma-manipulate yung memory. Pwedeng mag-iba, no? Depending on the information that you have received. Okay? And hindi naman to necessarily malicious. Minsan you're mistaken. Diba? These people were probably just mistaken. Parang kahit na nakita nila 8 yung demonstrators, pero na-influence sila nung question that was given to them, 4 demonstrators pa. Tapos tinanong sila a week later, ilan yung demonstrators dun sa video na pinakita sa inyo? Siguro mga 5 or 6. Parang yun yung idea. So it's not really something malicious or parang outright lying, but the point is memories can change, no? Memories can also be encoded or information can also be encoded automatically. Okay? So minsan nagta-transfer na lang bigla from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. Okay? That's what we call automatic encoding. And the reason for this sometimes is yung emotion that you are in. Parang related siya doon sa state-dependent what you call learning, no? Kanina. Yung flashbulb memories is when vivid yung memories mo because it was an emotional event. Parang, hindi ko makalimutan because blah 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 blah. No? And so what? Ano naman yung nun? Mamaya na yung so what, i-summarize ko lang yung entire video, no? So basically yun yung automatic encoding and flashbulb memories. Flashbulb memories is when you have vivid memories because of an emotional event. Though you have to note na itong emotion na to, it enhances vividness but not necessarily yung accuracy. So in this video, we talked about the retrieval of long-term memory, no? Getting it out. Talked about retrieval cues, yung encoding specificity, which is context-dependent, yung environment, or state-dependent, yung physiological or psychological state mo. And we also talked about the difference between recall and recognition. Recall, wala masyadong cues. Recognition, we just match the incoming information. But this is also an effect on sa study ni Dr. Loftus nga, no, yung sometimes false positives can occur. Kala mo yun yung talaga nakita mo, pero hindi naman talaga yun yung nangyari, right? Your memory doesn't necessarily match reality. And then we also talked about retrieval failure and yung serial position effect. And lastly, yung automatic encoding that is sometimes due to a strong emotional connection. And so, why does this matter? Yan na naman po tayo sa importanteng part ng ating video. Why does this matter? I was thinking about, ano ba yung so what nito? Ano ba yung now what nito? Well, if you want to be remembered, ganun pa rin, sa relationships pa rin. If you want to be remembered, or if you want to remember something, you want to associate it with emotional connection. So, for example, birthdays, you remember it, or celebrations, important events, happy moments, even sad moments. No? So, be there. Yan. Yun yung so what, now what natin. Be there for those moments kasi maaalala nila yan. Ay, wala siya ng graduation ko. Or, ay, hindi siya nagpunta ng birthday ko. So, as much as possible, try to be there for your friends, your family, whenever you have these important events in life. So, that's it for this video. I hope you learned something. Thank you.